Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and this is the top 100 games of all time as of 2023. At least, according to me, that is. I'm going to be going ahead and starting off this top 100. We're going to have a bunch of videos, so there's a whole bunch of little things and details to get out of the way. But first of all, we're going to have videos for you every Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday until this video series is done, which means basically 3 weeks and an extra day is what we're going to have over here. We're going to do Sunday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday for the top 100 games of all time. A few general things around list criteria, ways I put things together, just so you have an understanding of what this list means and how it relates to you or whatever it is. But the first and most basic and most obvious thing is these are my favorite games, the games that I like the most from all the games I've played. And I've played, according to my BG stats, I've played somewhere in the range of, I think, 1,800 games, something like that, over the 12 years I've been in this hobby at this point. And so, I think it's 12 years, 2011, 12 years that I've been in this hobby, I've played around 1,800 games, and these are my favorite 100 from those, with some caveats. The first caveat is, I only include games that are in my collection. That's just the way I look at it. There are some great games out there that I have left the collection over the years because I played them enough, or I had some reason, or this or that. Tigers and Euphrates is going to be a great example. I think it's an incredible game, better than some of the games on this list, but it's no longer in my collection because, a variety of reasons. We won't get into that right now, but that's going to be an example of a game that wouldn't be here. I've also used Pub Meeple for my rankings and buckets. What that means is I rank my games first in general buckets, you know, the 5s, the 4.5s, the 4s, and then I rank those buckets within Pub Meeple to be able to choose the 100 games that I think are the best or whatever to put together this list, and then some manual massaging wherever I felt the list could use it. There's also always going to be some degree of recency bias that I do try to counter, meaning if I've played a game that I love, and I've played that game several times this past year, it may go up a few points compared to a game that I might love that I happen to have not gotten to the table more than once or twice this year. Recency bias is a thing in this list, and it will affect games, especially if those games already deserve to be on this list. Although I do try to be mindful of that when talking about games that aren't on this list, that haven't been on this list at all in the past. If it's a new to me game for 2023, especially if it's something I've played in the past few months, I do try to be mindful of recency bias and possibly move things down a few points down the list if necessary to try to balance around that. At the end of the day, I like shiny new board games, and that does affect my opinion when I sit down and play a game like that was so much fun. It's the best game ever. So, yeah. I'll also say lastly, there's lots of notes and disclaimers, but I won't do this in every single video, probably not. But the last disclaimer I'll say is I do bundle categories. For example, I will tell you right now that there's going to be a Zombicide in my top 100, which won't be a surprise to many of you, but there will be a Zombicide in my top 100, but I bundle all those things together. All Zombicides get one umbrella, but I'll talk about which one I feel and all that when we get to Zombicide. I just don't see the reason or point to have several of the same game in the top 100. When something I feel falls into a similar category, I'll talk about it when I get to that item, and they're bundled. They take up the same spot, even though sometimes you might have one that would be a little lower. I usually just rank the one that I think is the best, and then I'll talk about the others doing that. So now that I spent like 4 minutes telling you about all the other things, let's go ahead and dive into top 100. But wait, first, one last thing. I almost forgot to do this one over here. Earlier today on the channel, I put up a video talking about supporting the channel. If you have enjoyed these videos that I've been doing over the past 4 years, I would ask that you watch that video. Whether you give, don't give, all those things, completely up to you, but I would ask that you do watch that video. I will be talking about that throughout the top 100 as I go through these videos. But with that, and finally, let's go ahead and start the top 100. Starting with number 100, we go down over here, we go from 100 down to 99, starting with number 100, which is going to be one that barely scraped off this list, and that's going to be Project Elite. Now, Project Elite is one of those games that could suffer from that recency bias. This is a game that I think could be higher on the top 100 if I played this more often, but I don't play it more often. Project Elite is going to be from Artipia games before that, but Project Elite is effectively a real-time game, but it's broken up into real-time sectors. You're going to have 2-minute sectors of live action, frantically rolling dice as the aliens race towards you on the board, slowly moving towards the camp. Every time you roll dice, you're rolling them having the hope that you'll get these symbols you need for your actions, but whenever you roll the alien movement symbol, they're going to be slowly charging towards you. And so you're desperately trying to use those 2 minutes as efficiently as possible to get as much as you possibly can done, but every time you roll the dice, you cause the aliens to move closer and closer towards you. But also, it breaks up that real-time freneticness with actual planning phases. And so you have this aspect in the game, you have this aspect that even as the aliens charge towards you, even as they're heading towards you on this map over here, you'll still have the ability to plan around how you want to operate, to talk to the other players, to discuss what you want to do, what are your best chances of survival, and so it combines real-time but broken up in a way that really works. This is not a game I table often, unfortunately, but when I do, I get an excellent, amazing, good experience out of it. It's one of the few real-time games, if possibly the only real-time game game that I have currently in my collection. I find real-time games, I often enjoy them, and then I want to like them, but they don't often stick around. Project Elite, barely scraping through the top 100, coming in at number 100. I should at some point do this video talk about stats of where games were in previous years, but I'm not going to do that for right now. Maybe we'll do a wrap-up video at the end of the top 100, going over comparisons to prior years. But for right now, we'll go to 99, which is Akropolis. Now, 99 over here, Akropolis, is a somewhat recent addition to my list. I played this at Gen Con for the first time in 2022. I really enjoyed it, gave it a 5 out of 5, but it has gone down for me. It's worth noting, by the way, people frequently ask, hey, I'd love to see a video of all your 5 out of 5s, and this top 100 will have all my 5 out of 5s, or at least all my 5 out of 5s that are still in the collection, that is, which is most of them, really. If you're 5 out of 5, it's a complicated conversation, but the thing, when a game leaves my collection, it's usually no longer a 5 out of 5, so that's a different conversation. But Akropolis, it's bumped down to a 4.5 out of 5. I'd say about the top 50 or so on the top 100, top 45 or so, or the lowest 45, are 4.5s, and the top 55 or so are my 5 out of 5s. But Akropolis is delightful. It has gone down for me over time. Currently it's at 4.5. I think this is an excellent experience, but one thing I talked about when I reviewed this game is I was concerned it didn't have the longevity. I was concerned it didn't have enough variety to the experience to keep my interest at a 5 out of 5 forever, and that has unfortunately held true. There are many games in that point scoring optimization category, and in Akropolis what you're doing is you're grabbing tiles, you place them together to try to score points based on the color and type of the tile. You also have point scoring combination things where basically you can go ahead and get extra points depending on which modifiers you use, getting extra points for the level of where you're at, for what you're adjacent to. You can have a whole bunch of ways of scoring points, but as you build up, you increase your point multiplier because you start off getting points for things, but every time you're on a higher level, your point multiplier increases. So you're trying to build wide and up and trying to take into account what's going to give you the best scoring combination as you draft these tiles, as you build over, earning yourself stone that you can use to get the right choice of tiles. I think it's an excellent, incredible experience. I still have a lot of fun with it. It isn't as variable as I would like. I'd love to see an expansion that in some way introduced or mixed up how the experience plays. My big problem with Akropolis is I'm playing the same exact game every single time. It doesn't really change in any notable form. There's no goals or nuances or anything to really mix it up. It's the same game. It is a good game though. I still enjoy it. This is my number 99, Akropolis. My number 98, another game that I don't play as often as I'd like. It's a little fiddly, but it is an excellent experience, and that is going to be The Great Wall, with the miniatures not even bagged at all in any way, shape, or form. The Great Wall from Awakened Realms over here. This is such an incredible experience when you actually play the game, but it is a little bit fiddly and takes away from how easy it is to table. This is a game I might table once, maybe twice a year. It's not the easiest to table. It's a longer experience. You have to find people who really know what's up, but when you do table it, you get some incredible gameplay out of it, although I do highly recommend the Black Powder expansion. I think that elevates the experience for me. But in the Great Wall, you're basically fighting off against having a bunch of people invade the Great Wall. You're building up your wall, you're building your defenses, you're going to have generals and advisors, and that to me is the crux of the game, because it is a worker placement game with an interesting card play mechanism where you kind of try to predict where you're placing your workers, and that will affect the other players' cards and all that. There's a little bit of a mind game going on, but for me, the crux of the game, where the game shines, is the fact that the generals and advisors are basically powers and abilities the whole way through. You can gather new advisors every single round that will give you new abilities, new ways to merge with your current tableau, which are incredibly rewarding to do so, or you can slot those same advisors underneath your general to power up your general's abilities. And so you're constantly chasing new abilities or stronger abilities as you play, while trying to recruit the right forces, while trying to place them on the invading forces. There's so much going on in this game experience, and there's so many ways to score points, being mindful of the end game goals, being mindful of the various enemies approaching your way. If you're playing with the Black Powder expansion, the additional threat that's at play that really escalates the tension of the game. It is not a semi-cooperative experience. It's not a cooperative experience. It's an experience where you're trying to build your forces, defend the walls, take down the enemies, earn as many points as possible, let the walls collapse when and where it doesn't hurt you but will hurt the other players. There's a lot to juggle in through this game as you go through it, but ultimately you're chasing points while doing so with advisors and generals that will make that experience significantly more rewarding and a whole lot more fun, and very, very, very variable. My number 97 is going to be Clover. The first but not the last party game you can expect to see on this list, because party games, the right party games, can be so rewarding. It's always interesting doing a top 100 when you're comparing something like The Great Wall side by side with Clover, different genres entirely, but trying to mentally think where those different games go, even though they are worlds apart in terms of how they operate and what they do. But Clover is one of my favorite party games. There's probably like 4, maybe 5 party games on this list. They're not my favorite genre, but when you have a good one, they really do hit well. And in Clover, I have a lot of fun with this one. In Clover, you're basically trying to combine different words, but you don't have a choice which words you're combining. You have to combine a house and a firefighter. How would you combine those? Well, this person combined them with station. You have to combine over here a child and a lamp. And this person wrote Nightlight. I don't know if I would have done Nightlight for child on that. Maybe. I could see it. I guess I could see it. The problem is you're being given these tableaus of cards. These 4 cards that are oriented a certain direction in that little board, and you have to come up with a linking word, and then you take all your 4 cards, you take an extra random card, shuffle it in, mix them all up, rotate them however you want, pass them to the rest of the team, because this is a cooperative experience, and then have them, is this the right way? It is the right way. Have them piece together what they think your cards were, with the additional fact that there's a wild card at play. And so they have to try to look, and they see Station, they see Nightlight, and they're trying to orient the various sides of the cards in ways that make the most sense given the criteria that you've given them. And then when they're done, you get to go ahead and say if it's right, or you get to say the 2 of these are right, 2 of them are wrong, and you go ahead and tell them which ones are wrong, and they try again, which you get one more chance effectively to go ahead and guess, but it's not nearly as fun. You really want to get it in that first try. It's incredibly rewarding when you do, but it can be such a good party game as trying to think through how somebody else would tackle the exact same problem presented. And you do that with everyone else having the same opportunity. Everyone has those boards. Everyone created the puzzles. And you work together to solve everyone else's puzzle one at a time. It produces some entirely amazingly fun moments. It is an excellent cooperative party game. This is so Clover, and it's a really, really good time. My number 6 is a guilty pleasure of mine, and that's going to be Valeria Card Kingdoms over here. Valeria Card Kingdoms is 100% a guilty pleasure game for me. This is a game that falls into the same realm, the same type of game as Catan, as Machikoro, as Space Base, as any of those games in which you are basically rolling dice, and on everyone's turn, everyone benefits from the dice rolled. You roll dice, you see what you get, everyone gets things, you go ahead, on your turn, you go ahead and take some actions to continue to increase and build up your tableau, and overall it's just giving you a really good time of just getting more and more and more. This is very much a guilty pleasure because I don't know if it's the best one out there. It's certainly not the best rated in general, but for me, I have so much fun when I play through Valeria. You can play through Valeria, the base game, which is a fun time. You can add a few basic expansions that don't really change the game but give you more variety, but they're okay. You can add in Crimson Seas, I think it's called Crimson Seas, which is the expansion that gives a whole new, different area to go ahead and find ways to spend your actions on. That is an entirely new way to play it. I don't recommend it for first-time players, but it can really mix up the game experience. You also have the cooperative expansion, Darksworn, where you're working together to take down the enemies, which takes the same gameplay mechanics and just gives you a tight little engine, and it is a tight, hard game as far as facing off against your enemies. But ultimately, Valeria is a game which you roll dice, get resources, get too much resources. Arguably, you simply have too much resources at your disposal, and you're trying to figure out the best ways to spend those resources as efficiently as possible to get what you want out of this. I find it such a ridiculously good time. It's got great art, great production, a ton of variability. The big box makes it a drop harder table than it used to be, but it's still one that does see the table time and time again. This is Valeria Card Kingdoms, my number 96. We're halfway done over here, and moving to 95, we have our first solo game. I mean, don't get me wrong, you could theoretically play Project Elite solo. I wouldn't recommend it. You can play the Great Wall solo. I've done so. Not personally my jam. Valeria Card Kingdoms, if you are playing the Darksworn version of it, I have played that solo, and honestly, I've enjoyed it quite a bit. But our first official solo game on this list, number 95, is going to be Under Falling Skies. Under Falling Skies, some CGE. This one still holds up for me. It's one of those games I've played it so many times that I continuously wonder how long it will last in my collection, but because of the fact that there's a campaign expansion in it, and the campaign expansion constantly introduces new elements or new cards and whatever, it's one of those things I don't think I've ever actually properly finished through the campaign properly. What I have done is I have utilized those components I've unlocked again and again in the game to be able to continue to dive into this, to continue to experience new mechanics within the game system, but ultimately it is a solo game in which you basically are playing through Independence Day, the board game. You're going to have aliens invading down the board over here, and you're rolling dice every single round, and stronger dice, higher dice, those 6s are better than those 2s. They're better for you. They'll get more out of the system for you, but they come with the caveat that it means when you place a 6, all the alien ships in that column are moving 6 towards you. So the higher the dice, the better it is for you, but the more aggressive the aliens are going to be in kind. And so the challenge of the game is to try to time everything out perfectly, because eventually, when those aliens hit certain key spots on the board, you have the opportunity to blow them out of the sky by assigning your dice to anti-aircraft bases. So it's a time mechanism where you need to assign the right dice while the aliens are in the right place. So the game is all about the elegance of how to get as much as possible out of the system while setting yourself up for those turns where you can still keep the aliens at bay, despite the fact that they are moving slowly but surely towards you. Again, that campaign, those different bases, the different additional modules, the various assistants you have, those are all things that keep the game system interesting. The robots will already take it to the next level. If you start the game, go ahead and play the first game, play it with robots too, see if it's for you, but there's a lot of nuance to the system. It is a challenging yet rewarding solo experience that ever since I first played this one, it has stuck around. It has gone down a little bit over time for me. That is natural. It's what happens as you play games more and more. That's going to be Under Falling Skies, my number 95. My number 94 is an interesting one to try to figure out where these games lie. Because my number 94 is the most played game in my collection ever. Period. That's going to be My City, where I have roughly 200 plays logged of My City. I have played through this legacy game so many times, and to be clear, when you play My City, you get 24 plays out of the box. I count each of those plays as a single play because they're each like a half-hour long session. I say this with frustration because Board Game Arena thinks that a single play of My City is 24 plays, which is a minor nitpick. But I've played this game nearly 100 times in Board Game Arena. I've played this game nearly 100 times in person. I've gone through an actual physical copy multiple times as I've gone through this. I've played this at 2 players, at 4 players. Weirdly enough, actually, I've played it at 3 players too. I forgot. I have played it at 3 players. That was on BGA, so I didn't think of that. In person, I played it at 2 and 4. On BGA, I played it at 2 and 3. So I've gone through this game quite a bit of times. But this is going to be My City, and it's a polyomino legacy game in which you're going to start off with a basic board where you're placing buildings down onto this board to try to fill up the board as much as possible while not placing on the forest and not placing on the mountains, trying to cover the rocks, don't cover the trees. That's basically everything you got as far as how the rules work in Game 1. In Game 2, they add more rules. Suddenly, adjacency matters. You may have noticed over here that they're playing the same colors. They're placing yellow next to yellow, red next to red, blue next to blue, because that will matter in Game 2. And then in Game 3, they add more rules. And in Game 4, they add more rules. And in Game 5, they add more rules and more rules until 24 games in, they have mixed and contorted and twisted and adjusted the rules, but still, it remains one of the most accessible legacy games out there. If you want to get a sense of what a legacy game is, a game where you literally tear up, destroy, adjust the components as you go, because you do that in My City. You only get 24 games out of this box, and after that you go into infinite mode, which I don't recommend. I'd recommend other games over it, although I will say if you're playing it at 2 players, you technically can go through a full second session going through it again because of the nature of how it has a 4-player game, so you can play through it twice at 2 players. Some adjustments as far as the sticker packs, the whatever, but nothing crazy. You can totally do it. But My City is accessible. It's easy to play. It gives you that drive to play just one more game, and it gives you that drive to do so 24 times, again and again and again. It is a lighter experience. It's not the best game I've played in my collection, but it's one of the most addictive and easiest to play games in my collection, which is why I have nearly 200, if not over 200, logged plays of My City. It is my most played game ever, at least in terms of like logged plays, not in terms of hours spent. Hours spent, we'd be talking about, well, there's a few other games on this list that are higher in hours spent. That's going to be My City, my number 94. My number 3 is going to be Calico, coming to you from Kevin Russ from Flat Out Games. Calico is a delightful little puzzler, and it's one of those games that does rival Akropolis in terms of the type of game it's trying to be. It's a puzzly experience. Draw tiles, place them onto your board, try to score as many points as possible through a variety of trying to get the right buttons, which is when you go ahead and line up the same tile in the right colors 3 times, trying to get the right cats, which is where you try to go ahead and have a certain shape or pattern of certain types in either certain types or numbers on your board, and then finally the actual goals themselves, because you're going to have on your board, you're going to have a bunch of things going on. You're going to have your individual goals over here, you're going to have the patches you're placing onto your board, and you're going to score for those goals. Goals will have things like, hey, you have to have around this goal tile, you have to have 3 of one, 2 of another, and 1 of another. For example, 3 blue, 2 pink, 1 yellow, that would fit the goal. But there's also patterns, because you could have 3 polka dots, 2 stripes, and 1 fleur-de-lis on your tile as well. And if you manage to do both of them, you score even more points. And so for me, Calico is a game that offers you the promise, the potential of a perfect game every single time, and then piece by piece, placement by placement, it slowly takes away that promise from you. It gives you potential and then dashes that potential time and time again, and yet it's not a harsh game, it's not a mean game, it's just a game you have to walk into knowing that you will not actually get everything you want out of the experience. You're just going to do the best you possibly can, trying to get as much as you possibly can. That's going to be Calico, my number 93 game of all time. My number 92 is a lot of fun, but it's a game that I'm also ranking based on the sum of its parts and not on any individual one thing, and that's because number 92 is Welcome to the Moon. Welcome to the Moon is going to be a 1 to 6 player game that gives you 8 different games in the box. This builds off the system that is Welcome to. It's a roll and write game, but really more of a flip and write game because you're not actually rolling. It's a flip and write game where you're going to flip cards and take certain actions based on those cards, based on those numbers, the combination therein that are created. And it starts you off with an incredibly basic map. An incredibly basic map that I think the only real purpose of that map is to kind of introduce you to the game. Although if you've played Welcome to, you already know the core concept of how this operates. But basically you're trying to fill in certain rows. You're filling up a rocket ship. You're taking off into space. It's a simple, easy map. Do not judge this game based on that first map. Because then you get to Mission 2. Mission 2 is not, it's not continuous. There's no, well, there's a legacy. There's a kind of campaign mode you could play as well, but you can also play it episodically, just one mission at a time, and Mission 2 takes you to the next step. What are you doing next over here? And it adds new rules, the same core structure, the same infrastructure, the same thing you've seen in Welcome to, but now the rules are changing up. Now there's extra things to be mindful of. And it does that across 8 different games. 8 different games that give you different rules, different twists on the core formula. And to me, I enjoy some of those more than others. Some are a great time, others are an okay time, but they give you variety, and the ones that I love might not be the ones you love. You might love, missions 3, 7, and 8. I actually really didn't like 8. 8 was probably one of my least favorite, arguably. I did not like 8 at all. 1 was kind of boring, but 8 was kind of convoluted. But everything else in the middle for me, 2 through 7, were good to various degrees. I particularly like the one where you have to try to go ahead and get your patterns up in ascending numbers to the left and as you go. There's a lot of fun little challenges going on. But Welcome to the Moon, it charms you with the, actually, Mission 2 over here. Mission 2 is one of my favorite, it happens to be. You're trying to break this off into sectors and fill the sectors accordingly. It's a fun little charm, but you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different missions, 8 different things, using the same core formula as you go through Welcome to the Moon. If you liked Welcome to, I think this is an essential must pick. And if you tried Welcome to Las Vegas, I don't think that one was that great at all, honestly. I think that one's a good pass. You can pass on that one. Welcome to has a place. This has a place. They're both fantastic games. But the variability of 8 missions in a single box, the sum of its parts adds it up to be my number 2 game of all time. And then the last game for this video, before we see you back again on Wednesday, the last game for this video is going to be my number 91, and that is Parks. A game that has dropped over time. This has been higher in my top 100 before, and I still love it, make no mistake. Just, time moves all things, and sometimes games that aren't staying, if a game is staying where it is, it's actually moving up on my top 100, because new games are found all the time, new experiences are found all the time. Parks has gone down a little bit, but it's still an excellent experience. One of the things I love about Parks, designed by Henry Audubon from Keymaster Games, one of the things I love about this game is how it plays on different levels. It plays as a light, fluffy game where you're wandering around a trail, gathering resources and trading them in to go ahead and see certain national parks. That's the easy way to play. But then there's that mean, tight game where you're blocking other players, trying to get one step ahead, moving your 2 hikers, timing them up, using your campfire, using all these tools at your disposal to try to get one step ahead of the other players as you block the pathway, as you take the trail, as you try to get ahead of everyone else, and you're playing a cutthroat game of gathering resources and sun and points and gear and all the things you need to be able to get one over your opponent. You're managing this trail over here. That's all you're doing. You're moving along a trail. It's simple, it's easy, but it also can be cutthroat depending on how or where you're playing it, and I like the fact this game plays on multiple levels. I've tried Trails, I think is the other version. I think Trails is fine, but for me, Parks is where it's at. This is my favorite version of the series, and that's going to be Parks, my number 91 game of all time. And that is going to be your first video in the series. I'll see you back here on Wednesday with my number 90 through 81, and we'll continue to go through this top 100, 1 week at a time, until we get to the very end. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Thank you so much for joining me, and as always, I hope you have a good one.